Welcome to Salsidoparanormal. I'm your host, James Salcido, the host, I should say. And tonight I have a special guest with me, and we're going to talk about winged humanoids. I probably should have looked up how to say that before I decided to do the show on the topic. But anyway, um, I'm going to skip all the usual introduction stuff just so we can have more conversation. And with me tonight, returning guest to the show, I'm very happy to have Jen with me again. So whenever you're ready, Jen, you're welcome to unmute, and we'll go from there.
Hey James, how are you? Can you hear me okay?
Sound is good. Yep. Thank you for being here and yeah, and agreeing to do this on the live my live stage channel anyway. Not that it's live to a huge audience just a second, but still, thank you for agreeing to be here and yeah, looking forward to this conversation.
Me too. Yeah, I love talking about these things, especially, the winged creatures is it's a great topic. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, I just I've been we've all probably here been looking into accounts of people's experiences for a while now, and some of the most amazing ones to me are those that involve these figures that are the size of a regular person or bigger and have wings, but
Mm-hmm.
then the wings don't move or flap, but they still appear to fly or move through the air without the wings moving, and it always just blows my mind. Um, I haven't. It's not that happens with every report of a sighting, but there's enough where it's made me wonder what is going on there over the years.
Yeah, I've had an experience with this, and so I'll bring that up later on or whenever you want to. But I've had an experience as sort of sighting with this type of cryptid, I suppose, or whatever you would call it. But I've experienced it myself, and I've heard many accounts of it. So prior to my experience, I had heard about it, but then when I had my experience, what I saw was just so bizarre that I began looking into it more and kind of tried to piece together what I had seen. And they're all so varied, all the accounts of other people, and even my own experience. They're they differ in so many ways that I think it's a complex topic and well worth talking about.
Yeah, that's the thing. I was trying to figure out something to look into for like an example, and the one that comes to mind that maybe people would recognize, and just as one example, because like you said, there's so many. They're not all specifically one kind of being. They all seem to. There's some that are more like bats, some that are more like birds, some that are just crosses between all different things. Some that are more humanoid than others. And the first one that came to mind, of course, is that people might know about is Mothman from West Virginia, from the Point Pleasant area there, all those incidents. But I am curious to hear about your experience if you want to go ahead with that first.
Oh yeah, sure I can. Mothman was exactly what I was thinking about too. But so about I guess it's been almost 5 years ago now. Um, that I had my experience, maybe 6 years ago even. But I lived out in a very rural area of the Ozark Mountains, and it was just a sort of hunting cabin that had been converted into a home, but it was out basically in just the middle of nothing. So it was very far out in the woods. And there was literally no store, even a gas station that was about 15, well, not, I guess it was 8 miles away. And then from there, probably about 15 miles to the nearest grocery store or anything of the kind. But it was just a long ways out in the middle of nothing. And even what was there was very little there. And the houses, anybody living out there, were spaced out. I'd say probably, you know, everyone there seemed to have a plot of land that was several, at least 10 acres or more. The property I was on was 364 acres. And it was basically being used at the time for people renting out to grow hay and cultivate hay. But it was on a little creek in Missouri, in southwestern Missouri. And the house itself was very, it was it didn't have a lot of modern conveniences. It had limited electricity. It was wood fire heat. And so I did a lot of wood gathering. And I'd go out and I'd go get wood and I'd bring it in to use in the wood burning stove. And there were these ridges, so I'd clear out all the wood. I had wood already, but I'm not chopping wood, so I was unfamiliar with doing any of this, and it just kind of happened upon me. So I was gathering a lot of fallen dead wood. And there was this one area I came across that was near to the property, and the property had been owned by a family that were farmers prior to that, but it had been unoccupied for a very long time. And so it was just basically like this, was very sort of desolate feeling because of the inactivity for so long. But there were these ridges. Hold on, I'm gonna move my dog real quick, and I'll come right back if you don't mind. 1 second.
Oh, no problem. Yeah, that's I think we talked during some of that time when you were out there, and just because through Discord, and yeah, I remember that description of it. That's I can't imagine being out that far from people. I'm very used to being right in the middle of a town, not necessarily a major city, but I've always been in a town, and I have relatives that live out in the country, but they're I don't see them all the time, just here and there, and they're way out there. So at least as far as it seems like that to me anyway. Maybe it doesn't seem like that to them. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, so I was going out and I'd wander out and get this dead wood, and I came across this one particular area. You could almost feel that you were going into it. It was all the same species of tree. It was all a type of cedar. There were these large boulder rocks that were spread throughout the forest floor. It was on a steep incline of the ridge, and so you had these large boulders, and you had this like just as far as you could see, these cedar. And if you get low on the forest floor, you could see across the whole forest floor. And I remember when I was out there getting all the wood, it was like the wind was blowing on this particular day. And it was like the wood was creaking, so I could hear the trees creaking. And there was a sensation of, you always kind of have your hackles up a little bit whenever you're out in there, because there's so many different types of wild animals. And so there are mountain lions, and there are black bear and things like that, and you just don't, and large coyotes. These are Ozark coyotes. They're like desert coyotes, are pretty big. And so I was always kind of on the watch, aware of that while doing this, and I would do it as early in the day as I could, but sometimes it would drift off into like dusk, essentially. And on this particular day, I had once I found that cedar grove, I had been researching about what you could do with cedar, and so I had gathered a lot of stuff. Like I was thinking about collecting the bark and things like that, and making sort of handicrafts with it, making use of it. Mm-hmm. And so I was in there, kind of picking up these different the cedar seed pods that come off the trees and things like that. And I was crouched down on the ground, collecting these up, and it felt, like I say, a sensation of being like some people call it like a phantom presence syndrome, where you suddenly feel as if someone is there. And I began to feel that in the woods, was where it really became obvious. And then it kind of quit. I actually stood up and It was just sort of this weird, ominous feeling of a presence in the woods. But I could see across the forest floor that there were no animals or anything. But there were none of the animals that I would, there was nothing out there. It was winter coming on. There was nothing out there. And I left. I got so uncomfortable that I left. And then later that night, I had this experience where I was just uneasy. I couldn't get comfortable. I couldn't relax, and I couldn't just lay down and go to sleep. It was just this strange feeling. And when I turned the lights off to go to bed, actually, it became this, I saw, and it could be, like you're in the dark and everything, but it looked like I could see these, like, shadows kind of shifting, and it looked like kites. Like, it was very large, and it was these movements in the darkness, and, like, it was like I could see these kite-like figures or something, very large, moving about the space. It's some type of either a visual hallucination or it was actually there, I don't know, but it was really obvious, and it almost felt like I could feel like a sort of communication of some kind, so much I couldn't get settled. It was like a swooping feeling. I don't know how to describe it. And then I got up and went into the kitchen, and I truly did feel like I was having some type of... something from the woods was, like, communicating with me in some way. Or that was the sensation. But also, too, I mean, being in the woods and being in that kind of environment and being alone... I mean, it could have been, I don't know, a psychological reaction to it. But there was a sensation as if there wasn't a type of presence. And I could see, like, what appeared to be, like, these... They moved like kites or something. I could see that, almost. Right. I don't know how to describe it.
Yeah, like no, when it's dark, it's... Yeah, when it's dark, it's hard. But, yeah, and I that's something I've heard about in people's experiences too, with that sense of a presence, or even, I don't know, there's the idea that these beings, whatever they are, they can either communicate or just sort of send energy at people and make them feel certain ways. So that doesn't surprise me. I'm hoping that was only that one night for you. That's a lot to... Sounds like a lot to...
It was really strange. It was as if the way that the communication of it was, and it's stumbling because it's just awkward, but it felt like the fact that I was taking things from the cedar grove. I know this sounds really bizarre. That they were wanting something in return or something. That was what I was picking up on. And they had said that they didn't see anything in the home that was of any value. Like, it was this strange sort of, almost, it felt telepathic or something. Like my mind was flooded with the sort of thinking. And I was aware, of course I'm aware, that it's just your own thinking, most likely, but it didn't seem that way. I say that now just to prevent any kind of confusion about it, but it did seem like there was some kind of communication going on. And when I looked into it, like, the next day, like, at the time, I literally did give an offering outside and just kind of, to feel better about it, I guess.
Right.
Because I've heard about things like this. And I did think it was some type of forest spirits or entities or something that were that was some kind of special grove or something special with the trees, and that I actually just never went back in there again in the time that I lived there. I kind of avoided going up in there for wood or deadfall or anything else. I'd go around it. It felt like there was something very bizarre about it. But also, too, when I would go near those groves, I would hear crows. Like, the crows would come up and they would start cawing and stuff like that. And there's a strange thing about that. Usually crows come around, I mean, they're known for being around carrion and stuff like that, like dead animals or things like that. But it can draw up other critters, like coyotes or things like that. In fact, there have been stories of wolves or of these animals collaborating and traveling together that way. But they would appear around that grove as well, and it just gave me this sort of spooked feeling, and I wouldn't go in there, especially after the experience I had, which I'm not really. I mean, you can't really. You have a personal experience, but you can't really translate it into something that makes any sense because it was a personal experience, felt completely by myself. But it did seem as if there was some type of possibility. And when I was looking into it, there were these types of entities that were described when I did research about it exactly as I described when I was looking into trying to figure out what, if possibly, what I had seen or experienced, because it was so obviously, to me, out of the ordinary and just not in my normal experience, that there was something to it. But that they do kind of guardian different tree groves or certain bodies of water and things like that, and they do have interactions with people. But that was the only time I ever had an experience like that, and they looked like winged beings, almost bird-like. They had it looked like a bird, like a human, like a almost human or a slightly bigger size than a bird. But when they would open up their wings, it was like a kite, and they moved through the air like as if they were a kite, opening and closing, like a kite sort of does when it's caught in the wind. Instead of rather flapping their wings, they glided. Anyway, it makes me very anxious to talk about it, but it did seem like I had accidentally offended or something to that effect, so I just avoided it altogether from that point on. So it actually gave me that kind of impact from it.
Yeah, no, I don't blame you at all for that. And yeah, that's these. There's all these figures, all these that are seen like that, and others. Let me. I have this article here, and I'll share these articles in the episode descriptions too. But I found a couple articles. If anyone is looking for a website that has some decent articles and all these things, All That's Interesting is the name of the website, and I've gotten a lot of good articles for using on these shows there. But going back to the Mothman in Point Pleasant, West Virginia, it was first sighted, apparently, according to this article, in 1966, around that time. And it was described by people at the time as a winged creature. Apparently, a couple of people described the wings as being white colored, which I'd never heard of that before. But it was 6 or 7 feet tall, standing in front of the car that people were in. In this one case, with a couple, two couples that were there, and they also had, of course, the red eyes, bright red eyes, that were 6 inches apart. So that's a good ways apart. 10 feet wingspan, and it apparently was trying to avoid the people that were there, even though it was right in the road. But so that's sort of this creature that there's been, of course, a famous book made about that whole set of incidents, among others, the whole Mothman Prophecies book by John Keel, which I will be reviewing at some point. And then, of course, that was turned very loosely. A movie was very loosely based on some of that as well, and became fairly popular. But but again, this is a figure that is humanoid, but not quite really exactly human, the way that it's described, and could fly, but then didn't really need to move its wings. And I think gliding is definitely a possibility for how some of these beings could move around. And so maybe that is how most of them do that. I wonder if that's, again, there's no way to know for sure if all of them move that way, but yeah, so this is sort of what I wanted to get into here. That's the most amazing thing to me, is the idea that there's these beings that they have wings, and yet supposedly the wings in some cases don't seem to be big enough to support anything that size to allow it to fly, and yet they seem to move around. And that just blows my mind that this is a possibility. I guess partly because I've always looked more into sort of ghost stories than I've had anything else. So I'm still pretty new to all the creature kind of the cryptid kind of stuff, if that is what it is. So, but yeah, I don't know if what your experience is with as far as looking into Mothman, Jen. If you want to talk about that for a little bit.
Well, I've heard about Point Pleasant and the experiences that they were having, that it was almost an ominous sign. People were seeing it, and then of course they had that terrible, the bridge collapsed and all of that. And then people reported seeing things like that in other instances. I've heard about it around volcanoes and landslides and things like that, that there is something living that there might be some type of cryptid or some type of creature. It could be interdimensional or otherwise, going in and out of the cave systems. And so, I mean, with Mothman, the way that people described it, people tried to explain it away as being some type of owl or a type of bird that might frequent that region. But the size and the wingspan and everything is what shocked people the most. And if it was this type of bird, it really doesn't deflect from the story, in my opinion. I mean, if it was an unknown species of bird to the general public of that region, and then they began to see it prior to this instance, there are omens that talk about certain creatures or animals that do appear that usually would not be seen in that region due to some type of event that was going to transpire. So it's almost like this sort of communication between the what we would call the animal world with humanity too, that there's some kind of connection. Basically, like the way that even people read bird patterns of flight or directions and things like that could tie into that. So this could truly be, I mean, we have there's the idea of Jekyll Island, where there were all these creatures that were made that were playing around with DNA of different animals and things like that. And so I wouldn't put that out of the realm of possibility. So you have the possibility that these were some type of altered species, or that they could have been a common cryptid, a type of not a lesser known species of animal that typically isn't seen, that is seen around certain events. And I've always thought that way about the cryptids. There's a possibility of that. Like in the instance of when Mount St. Helens blew, people saw, the Sasquatch, the Bigfoot. There were reports of that were really prominent at that time, that the animals were moving around for that. Now, a bridge collapsing wouldn't seem... I think there must have been more going on there. I know they had underground tunnels and things like that. There might have been more going on at Point Pleasant than what we're aware of or what we are told about. Because a bridge collapsing is significant, but maybe there was more going on.
Well, and that's the amazing thing too, is with that book, that the Mothman Prophecies. There's reports of and we're going to end this here for now, this episode in the moment, but reports of sightings of lights in the sky and even craft in some cases, and even supposedly Men in Black encounters, all those kinds of things around that same time that residents and John Keel himself were experiencing there. So all of that was happening in around the same time as the Mothman sightings, and then, of course, all this leading up to the collapse of the Silver Bridge. So we will continue this discussion here in another episode, and thank you all for listening. And we will talk to you all next time on Salsido Paranormal. Take care.